Hi, my name is Indira. 3 years ago, my sister switched out my heart medication, called it a joke. I nearly died. My parents begged me not to speak, said, "Don't ruin the family." But what kind of family covers up cruelty? They erased my voice, doctored photos, rewrote stories where I didn't exist, so I sued my own sister. And what happened in that courtroom? Let's just say silence didn't win. Do you still think blood is thicker than justice? The morning began like any other Monday. The hospital's administrative wing buzzed with the faint shuffle of papers, the muted hum of fluorescent lights, the soft cadence of staff voices trading updates. Our conference room sat on the east side of the building, windows wide enough to frame the parking lot below where cars lined up in neat military rows. Sunlight slanted across the laminate floor, casting long rectangles of pale gold that stretched toward my chair. I had arrived early, as always, with my badge clipped neatly to my blazer, coffee cooling at my elbow, and my notes stacked in meticulous order. I'd taken my medication at 6:30 sharp, as I always did. The habit was ingrained into me. The bottle on the nightstand, one pill swallowed with a measured sip of water, routine as brushing my teeth. I thought nothing of it when I sat down at the head of the table, scanning the spreadsheet for patient intake statistics. My voice carried steadily across the room as I highlighted numbers, trends, and bottlenecks. It was all second nature, until suddenly, it wasn't. A strange flutter rippled through my chest, subtle at first, almost ignorable, like a hiccup in my heartbeat. I paused mid-sentence, my eyes still fixed on the screen. Then the flutter became a pounding, fierce and unrelenting, as though my own heart had turned against me. Each thud rattled my ribs, each breath caught short, shallow. I reached for the edge of the table, my knuckles blanching white as the spreadsheet blurred before me. The conference room tilted, faces around me warped and swirled, colleagues' voices muffled like they were calling from underwater. The fluorescent bulbs overhead flickered in cruel rhythm with the racing in my chest. I tried to speak, to reassure, to dismiss, but my mouth refused to form words. Panic rushed in, and my legs gave out beneath me. I crumpled to the floor, papers scattering, the sound of someone shouting my name the last thing I registered, before darkness surged forward like a wave crashing down. When consciousness returned, it was fragmented. Cold white lights burned above me. A steady rhythm of machines beeped at my side. The sterile smell of antiseptic hung heavy in the air. My throat felt thick, dry, as though I'd swallowed chalk. I blinked, and the blurry outlines sharpened into the shape of a nurse adjusting the IV lines taped against my arm. Her expression was focused, professional, the kind of face that gives comfort by refusing to betray alarm. Then I noticed him, a cardiologist standing over me, his white coat immaculate, his brow furrowed. He asked questions. Had I taken any new medications? Any changes in dosage? His voice was calm, but I could hear the urgency beneath it. I tried to answer, but the words barely escaped, thin and broken. The room still felt surreal, disjointed, as though I were floating half outside my own body. The door opened, and suddenly they were there. My parents swept in through the front entrance of Lexington Hospital, their presence as commanding as ever. My father, with his military posture and clipped movements, strode in first, his expression carved in stone. My mother followed, her face pale, her lips trembling as though rehearsed. And then Seraphine, the sister everyone praised, the golden one, with her perfectly arranged tears, stepping into the role of grieving witness before I had even finished waking up. They circled my bed, not with relief, not with love, but with calculation. Their eyes scanned the monitors, the IV, the nurse's notes, sizing up the situation as if my near-death experience were nothing more than a logistical complication. The air thickened, suffocating in its lack of sincerity. The cardiologist asked for my medication. My bag had been brought in with me, the pill bottle retrieved from inside. He studied the label, frowned deeply, and then looked at me with an expression that confirmed my worst suspicion. "This dosage doesn't match your prescription," he said quietly, but firmly. The words cut through the fog like glass. My heart lurched, not from arrhythmia this time, but from recognition. Someone had switched the pills. This wasn't an accident. This was tampering. For a moment, silence weighed over the room like a slab of stone. No one breathed. No one spoke. Then my mother broke first. She leaned in, grasping my hand tightly, her tears sudden, her voice trembling. Indira, you can't do this. Don't make a scene. If this comes out, Seraphine will lose everything. Please, just stay quiet. Her plea sliced deeper than the chest pain that had felled me. My father's voice followed, cold and commanding, cutting across the room like a verdict. If you expose this, you're no daughter of ours. Remember that. The words detonated inside me. I lay still, my body weak, but my mind spiraling. I had nearly died, my body collapsing on the floor of a hospital conference room. And still, to them, I was nothing but a liability. Not a patient, not a daughter, not a person worthy of protection. Just an obstacle in their carefully constructed narrative. I stared at them. The mother who begged for silence, the father who wielded disownment like a sword, the sister who let crocodile tears roll down her cheeks. Fury and disbelief coiled in my chest, sharper than any arrhythmia. Slowly, with trembling fingers, I reached toward the bedside table. My phone lay there, screen dark, waiting. I tapped it awake. My thumb slid to the record function. I pressed it. The soft red light blinked, marking the moment. My voice came out thin, cracked, but steady enough to capture. I almost died, I whispered, staring at the ceiling, at the fluorescent glow that had watched me fall. And still, I don't matter. The room remained silent, but the phone in my hand hummed, storing the words they would never be able to erase. I pressed stop on the voice memo, paused for a heartbeat, then saved it. On the small hospital display, I saw the timestamp, 2:11 p.m., exactly when my heart had faltered. My limbs still felt like wet jelly, but I forced myself to sit up. I glanced at Seraphine's teary face across the room and felt a shock of regret. No, anger, instead of comfort. That's where I begin. The tape ended, but the past had just opened itself. I remember the day I first believed silence would save us. Growing up in Arlington, Texas, our house sat behind a chain-link gate with rose bushes lining the path. Summers were loud, roosters crowing before dawn, lawnmowers buzzing. But inside, voices were always hushed, always measured. I was 7, chasing a red ball across the yard when Seraphine shouted from the porch, "Watch it!" She shoved me. I stumbled, landed on knees, scraping skin open. My tears flowed before I even recognized pain. I ran inside, voice shaking, telling Mama what happened. Parenting that day. Dad sat in the brown recliner, reading. He looked up once. "You're overreacting," he said. Not angry, not kind, just dismissive. Mama, standing in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. "You need to toughen up. Your sister has stress. Don't make everything about you." That was the lesson I absorbed. Emotional injury, redefined as weakness. Later, in middle school, my 13th birthday was supposed to be a celebration. Our family gathered in the living room, white balloons, cake, laughter. My cousins sat cross-legged on the floor. But the moment the cake knife passed Seraphine, things changed. She stabbed a small slice and flicked frosting at me. I flinched. She laughed. Someone teased, "Smile, Indira." A slap landed across my cheek. A friend's move cam caught it all. The room erupted in laughter. The camera blinked. I held my face, stunned. Later, I showed Mama the footage. "You're taking it too seriously," she said. "It was nothing but fun." That moment carved something inside me, that my softness would always be twisted into drama. Years merged into acquiescence. Seraphine grew popular, cheerleading, honor roll, smiling face of the PTA board. She wore perfection like armor. I watched from the wings, disciplined and quiet. When she flubbed a speech, she blamed stage fright. When she missed homework, she told Mom, "I forgot." Every excuse was accepted. Mine never were. "She didn't mean it," Mama would say whenever I dared to murmur I was hurt. "She didn't mean it." That phrase became a mantra in my mind, a silencing balm for others, a denial of my pain. From scraped knees to emotional wounds, everything I carried was labeled accidental. I swallowed that lie so many times I believed it. Then there was Grandma Edwina, on rare weekends when she would drive from her nursing home to sit with me in our backyard. She brought 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream and butter pecan cones, and we'd sit on a creaky wooden bench. She never asked me to forgive Seraphine. Instead, she whispered in my ear, so no one else would hear. "One day, you'll speak, and they'll listen." I looked at her wrinkled hands, saw directories of sacrifice in every crease. That memory warmed me when nights were cold, and my heart trembled with unlived courage. Back in Dallas, with hospital lights framing my sleepless face, I clasped that memory tightly. It was all I had, an ember of belief that voice might matter. In the dark, I started drafting a statement. My fingertips hovered over the keys. The past buzzed in my veins. I'd been silent so long, now the silence trembled on edge. The moment I hit record last night, something within me shifted. It wasn't just a physical motion. It was a reclaiming. Something that had long been buried beneath years of forced silence, gaslighting, and carefully curated family images began to stir. The weight of years spent watching my own story be twisted, erased, or simply ignored. It was too much. And so I pressed the button, and something inside me settled. That tiny red light on the screen glowed back at me, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel afraid. I felt seen, even if it was just by myself. The walls around me, those pale, lifeless hospital walls, felt colder that night. The buzzing lights hummed louder, but the ember inside my chest burned warmer, brighter. I was sitting at the edge of the bed, my legs dangling, heels not quite touching the tile. I looked over at my nightstand. Inside the second drawer was a camcorder I hadn't touched in years, one I once used to document family birthdays, awkward holidays, lazy summer days. I pulled it out, dusted it off like a relic, and plugged it into my laptop. At first, it was just noise, laughing voices, clinking silverware, children yelling across backyards. But then I started to see, really see. There was Seraphine brushing past me, her elbow a little too sharp. Another clip, a backyard 4th of July. Seraphine leaned in and muttered something in my ear, eyes narrowed. I couldn't hear the words, but I remembered the sting. I zoomed in on the frame and froze, just behind my ear, faint and partially hidden beneath my hair, a bluish bruise. My breath caught in my chest. I paused the video, right-clicked, saved, labeled it carefully. Seraphine Shove, Christmas Eve, 2014. My fingers trembled. That was just the beginning. I went to my closet and knelt down, reaching behind the rows of neatly hung clothes, past the old boots I no longer wore. I pulled out a folder wrapped in layers of fabric, like I had subconsciously been protecting it from judgment or fire or theft. Inside, DVDs, flash drives, old memory cards. Years of recordings I had hidden away from everyone, even from myself, and I watched. I saw myself at 10 years old, eyes wide, cheeks red, tears forming as someone pushed me behind the shed. Another clip. My 12th birthday, the cake still whole because no one showed up on time. Seraphine slapped my arm in jest, too hard. The camera caught it. And then there was my mother, standing in the corner, arms crossed, saying sharply, "You need to toughen up, Indira. The world doesn't have room for crybabies." Each clip was a wound, but also a revelation. I dragged them, one by one, into a new folder on my computer. I named it Archive Truth. For now, it was set to private, for my eyes only. But that wouldn't last forever. Hours passed. My phone buzzed. I didn't look at it at first. Then it buzzed again, this time a message from Corinne, my cousin. "Hey, saw you digging through that old box you left at my place." "You okay?" That short sentence made my chest tighten in unexpected ways. Concern, curiosity, warning. A few minutes later, another notification. This time from Seraphine. "You need to stop this. You're going too far." Go too far? I hadn't even started. My group family chat was already buzzing. I scrolled through, stomach turning. Aunt Marlene had posted an old picture. Everyone at a cookout, all smiles. Except I wasn't in it. Not because I didn't attend, but because they had cropped me out. On purpose. Comments followed. "Guess she's canceled again. Always so dramatic. You know how she is." Then my brother-in-law chimed in with his signature faux wisdom. Let it go, Indira, for peace. Peace. That word has always felt like a warning when it came from them. A muzzle. A way to keep the status quo, as long as I stayed quiet and small. I didn't reply to any of them. Not Corinne, not Seraphine. Not the group chat that used to include me, but now acted like I was a glitch. Instead, I uploaded the contents of Archive, truth to a secure encrypted drive. Access, me, only me, for now. I stood in front of the mirror later that night, staring at my reflection. I didn't look strong, I looked pale, tired, eyes rimmed red, but I also looked solid, steady. My hands still shook, but my spine didn't bend. Then, like a storm breaking without thunder, Mama showed up. No text, no call. Just her at the door. I opened it. She stepped inside like a stranger, surveying the room as though she might find something she could use against me. Her eyes were soft at first, but her tone was not. She moved toward the kitchen counter, poured water into a glass, and I noticed her hand trembled as much as mine had. She took in the sight, discs on the table, laptop open, file names on the screen, the pillowcase still damp in the corner. She understood immediately. You're ruining everything your father and I built, she said quietly. Her voice wasn't raised, but every word landed like a gavel. Don't come begging back when you lose everyone. Her words struck a nerve, but I held my ground. We made sacrifices for you, she went on, her voice quivering, though not with sadness. You think everything is about you? You think we did this to hurt you? I stepped back, heart thudding, and raised my hand, not to strike, but to halt. I'm not going back to silence, I said calmly. I'm not invisible anymore. I'm not drama. I'm truth. Her eyes flickered. For a moment, I thought she might cry. But instead, she turned on her heel and left. Later that night, I curled into bed with my grandmother's ring in my hand. Grandma Edwina, the one who always saw me, who whispered words into my ears as a child, words I didn't understand until now. You'll speak, and they'll listen. But would they? Would they really listen? Or would they try, once again, to silence me under the guise of keeping the peace? I opened a blank document and hovered my fingers above the keys. My pulse thundered. My eyes stung. But I began typing, slowly, clearly, with no room for denial. I was almost killed, not by accident. Then I stopped. The truth hung there in black letters. My throat closed, my body froze, but my story, was just beginning. They erased me once, but not again. That morning, as I stepped through the glass doors of the community center, a chill ran down my spine. Though the air outside was warm, almost summer-like, I wasn't just carrying a folder of printed papers. I was carrying history, bruises no longer visible, words that echoed in the back of my skull, glances that once turned cold, years of pretending, of shrinking, of swallowing my own story so someone else's could shine. I pressed the stack of documents, my statement, my truth, tightly against my chest, tucked inside the inner pocket of my navy blazer. It felt heavy, but not in the way paper should. It was the weight of memory, of suppressed rage, of clarity finally given voice. Inside, the community brunch was already well underway. The wide, multi-purpose room had been transformed for the occasion. White linen-draped folding tables, gold plastic cutlery, paper name cards, and overly cheerful centerpieces with silk flowers. The scent of syrup and orange juice floated in the air. At the back of the room, volunteers in matching aprons refilled carafes of coffee and trays of breakfast casseroles. People clustered in small groups, laughing and chatting like it was just another Sunday morning in a perfect town. I scanned the crowd. Neighbors from our old street, former church acquaintances, high school friends of Seraphine's, second cousins I hadn't spoken to since Grandma Edwina's funeral. A few offered half smiles when they saw me, but it was clear their smiles didn't reach their eyes. Seraphine stood near the podium at the front, radiant in her soft pink and cream outfit, like she'd stepped off a lifestyle magazine cover. Her curls were carefully sculpted, her jewelry delicate, her expression composed. She greeted people with an arm around their shoulders, a knowing laugh, a practiced warmth. To her left stood my father, his posture proud and commanding. His handshake was firm and public, the kind that always said, "I'm in control." My mother floated between them like a practiced socialite, her voice lilting, expressions polished and polite. They looked like a family untouched by conflict, perfect from the outside, immaculate, but their eyes betrayed them. They flicked toward me every so often, always quick, always calculating, gauging my mood, reading my body language, assessing how much I might ruin if I opened my mouth. They were hoping I wouldn't, but they knew I might. They had seen the change. They'd heard the silence between us grow cold and final. They just hadn't expected me to act. At 11:55 a.m., a man in a crisp gray suit, Camden, Seraphine's PR handler or new boyfriend or both, stood and tapped a spoon gently against a water glass. The sound rang out like a bell. The room stilled. Conversations quieted. Forks froze halfway to mouths. All eyes turned toward the podium. Camden smiled with the practiced polish of someone who had spoken into many microphones before. "Thank you all for joining us this morning," he said, his voice echoing through the small sound system. "It's a special day for our community. We're proud to announce Seraphine's newest wellness initiative, an outreach program to support mental health, youth mentorship, and wellness across the county. She's truly putting our town on the map." A polite, well-timed applause followed. I didn't clap. I couldn't. My hands were folded tightly in my lap, knuckles pale from pressure. My pulse roared in my ears. And then, before I could talk myself out of it, before the fear or shame or decades of conditioning could pull me back, I stood. A soft gasp rippled across the room. Chairs squeaked, heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. I cleared my throat, voice catching. "If no one else will say it," I paused. "I will." A dense, brittle silence followed. It wasn't the silence of curiosity. It was tension, suspicion, dread. I took a breath and continued. What happened to me wasn't drama. It was nearly death. You could have heard a pin drop. A fork clattered against a plate at a nearby table. Somewhere in the back, a child whimpered before being quickly hushed. My heart slammed against my ribs like a drum. I felt the heat rise to my face, but I didn't flinch. Not this time. Seraphine's face went pale. She didn't speak, couldn't. She stood frozen, hands still on the microphone stand. Her expression flickered. Confusion, then anger, then something like fear. My mother let out an audible gasp. My father's jaw clenched. I saw cousins exchanging glances. Some looked away. Others stared like they were watching a building collapse in real time. Still, I stood. The tension fractured when Seraphine finally snapped, her voice sharp, sarcastic, shaking at the edges. "Oh my God, Indira, lighten up. It was a mistake. You're acting like I tried to kill you." Someone at the back of the room chuckled. Another followed. The sound of their laughter sliced through me like broken glass. My stomach turned, but I stayed grounded. My father suddenly stood and gripped Seraphine's arm. "Sit down, Seraphine," he said, his voice low, clipped, forceful. He didn't look at her. He looked directly at me. A warning. A threat wrapped in fatherly concern. I said nothing to him. Instead, I nodded slowly. My hands moved with quiet precision as I gathered the papers I had printed the night before, each one a page of testimony, of memory, of proof. No tears, no apology, no retreat. I slipped each sheet back into the folder, took a deep breath. My lungs expanded with something that felt dangerously close to freedom. Then I turned and walked out, straight-backed, head high. I could feel every gaze trailing behind me, sticking to my skin like smoke. But I didn't look back. As I stepped outside, the harsh artificial light of the brunch gave way to sunlight streaming through the windows of the entryway. Dust particles floated in the air like glitter. I paused in the warmth of it, let it wash over me. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to my attorney's contact, typed 2 words, "I'm ready," and I hit send. I zipped the flap of my bag shut and stepped out into the thick afternoon air. The Texas sun rested gently on my face, not harsh, not scalding, just soft, as if the sky itself had decided to offer me a moment of grace. Brunch was over. The applause had faded. The stares were behind me. But my own words still rang in my ears like a bell I couldn't unring. What happened to me wasn't drama. I said it out loud, and now it lived in the world, no longer trapped inside me, no longer rewritten by others. I walked alone through my quiet neighborhood, tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, flowering crepe myrtles swaying in the late afternoon breeze. Each house I passed had the same well-kept suburban look, but I felt like I was moving through a ghost town, haunted by truths too inconvenient for these sidewalks to carry. Under my arm, I held a manila envelope, a thick bundle of legal documents, medical reports, police statements, and annotated video timestamps. I clutched it like a shield, like proof that I hadn't imagined what had been done to me, that I had been there, that it had happened, that I survived it. When I reached my apartment, I unlocked the door with more force than necessary and shut it behind me with finality. I stood in the entryway for a moment, still holding my breath, still holding the weight of the room I had just left behind. The echo of all those faces at the community center lingered in my mind, their half-hearted smiles, their averted gazes, their careful refusal to engage, like I was a storm cloud threatening their sunny afternoon. They didn't want to hear it, didn't want it to be real, because if it was real, they'd have to choose, and none of them wanted to. My heart was sore, but I didn't let it sink me. I turned the ache into motion. I dropped my bag by the door, pulled out my laptop, and powered it on. The screen glowed blue, familiar, comforting. I logged into my secure email account, the one my family didn't know about, and began to type. My hands shook slightly, but I didn't stop. To Camden, Marisol, Seraphine. CC, Attorney L. Halpern. I'm writing this to state clearly what has always been true. I was harmed. I nearly died. The medical records, camera footage, and video clips I possess will no longer be buried in drawers or folders. They will be seen. And if anything remotely resembling that trauma happens again, if I am gaslit, threatened, or harmed in any way, I will pursue legal action without hesitation. This is not vengeance. It is truth. I have the right to live free of violence. I have the right to my story. You no longer get to rewrite it. I paused before clicking send, not because I doubted myself, but because I could feel what came next, that irreversible shift in the air, that moment when things fracture for good. I hit send. A notification popped up, delivered to all recipients. The weight on my chest lifted slightly, but in its place came something else, a tremor, a breathless anticipation, dread curling in my stomach like smoke. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was total. 3 days passed. Not a single message, not a call, not an email, not a door knock. Just silence so profound I could hear the gentle hum of my refrigerator as I lay awake at night. I counted seconds, then minutes, then hours. I refreshed my inbox. I checked voicemails. Nothing. Until the 4th day, I opened Facebook out of habit, still half asleep, coffee in hand, and my heart fell into my shoes. A post from my cousin, a wedding invitation. Camden Marisol requests the honor of your presence at their union. The invitation was shared publicly and tagged with family members, including Seraphine. Not me. I wasn't just excluded. I was cut, omitted, forgotten by design. Below the invitation, new family photos from the brunch were uploaded to a shared album. Tables of smiling faces, warm lighting, floral centerpieces, cousins with arms around one another, aunties laughing, even Seraphine giving a speech. I kept scrolling, then stopped cold. There was a group photo. I had been standing on the far right that day. But in this version of the image, I was gone, cropped. The edge of my shoulder was barely visible. They had removed me, literally, from the memory. My throat tightened, my eyes burned. A private message came in, as if to twist the knife, from one of my cousins. We had to remove some people from the album to ease tensions. Hope you understand. Hope I understand. I stared at that sentence, fingers hovering above the keys. Then I replied, That's not peace. That's erasure. I didn't wait for a reply. Moments later, a voicemail dropped in from Camden. I didn't recognize the number at first, but the tone gave it away. I pressed play. His voice was clipped, polished, cold. Don't push us further, Indira. We've tolerated enough. Choose your battles wisely. That last sentence echoed long after the message ended. I hit replay, again and again. Each time, his voice sounded less like a family friend and more like a man issuing a verdict. Like I was the one causing harm. Like my pain was an inconvenience they'd indulged long enough. Humiliation boiled in my chest. I stared at the screen, fingers clenched. The betrayal wasn't new, but it was sharper now, more complete. I closed my eyes, took a long, slow breath. Grandma Edwina's voice returned to me like a melody. Speak! They will listen! I opened my eyes. No more waiting, no more silence. I opened my desktop folder marked Archive and Truth, selected 5 video clips. They were short but undeniable, moments of bruises, of gasps, of words hissed under breath when no one thought the camera was watching. I titled the compilation, What They Called a Joke Almost Ended My Life. My finger hovered over publish. I looked around my small living room, the apartment I had built for myself from scratch, the life I had rebuilt after everything. My laptop hummed, my heart pounded. Then I clicked, publish. A notification popped up, live. Within minutes, the video was viewed, then shared, then commented on. The numbers climbed, the silence shattered. Supportive comments came in from strangers. You're brave. This matters. Keep going. Not all were kind. Some accused, some doubted. Some asked why it had taken so long. But I didn't flinch, because now the truth was out, and they could never erase me again. When the gallery invitation arrived, tucked inside a thick, glossy envelope with a gold foil edge and embossed logo, I froze. For a moment, I couldn't decide whether to toss it directly into the trash or pry it open like it might detonate. I turned it over in my hands, twice, then slid a butter knife along the sealed edge. Inside was an elegant trifold card, printed on heavy cardstock. The typeface was clean and deliberate. Thrive. Well, Annual Health Innovation Gala. Fort Worth Civic Center. Friday, 7:00 p.m. What made my breath catch wasn't the event itself, it was the fact that my name was listed in the fine print under foundational contributors. I hadn't been involved with Thrive Well in over a year. I'd quietly stepped down after Seraphine's presence on the board became increasingly performative, and the ideas I brought to the table were either ignored or mysteriously absorbed into someone else's credit. After I posted my video, What They Called a Joke Almost Ended My Life, I thought I had severed every cord tethering me to those old rooms. Apparently not. For the first time in weeks, I felt something beyond exhaustion, beyond hurt. It was curiosity. No, not quite. More like dread, wrapped in curiosity, ribboned with fury. I sat at my desk and replayed the video again. Views were still climbing. 18,732 views in 24 hours. The likes, the comments, the shares. My inbox was a mess. Some strangers thanked me, some accused me. But what mattered was this: people were finally listening, and if Seraphine had the gall to take that stage and claim my work, the wellness proposal I wrote, refined and once entrusted to her, I was going to be there. Not to scream, not to crumble, just to stand. 3 Fridays later, I arrived at the Fort Worth Civic Center in a black satin sheath dress and low heels. I didn't want to distract or impress. I came armed with nothing but my truth, and one slim folder tucked into my clutch. The grand ballroom glowed under crystal chandeliers, casting delicate amber halos across the polished floor. Waiters in black carried silver trays of champagne and cucumber canapés. Laughter rose in waves from the donor tables. The scent of white lilies and citrus oil lingered in the air. Music played softly in the background, a string quartet, maybe pre-recorded. Familiar faces dotted the room, all in curated elegance. Reporters from local outlets and lifestyle magazines hovered near the walls. One was already interviewing Camden in front of a Thrive Well banner. I slipped past without a glance, invisible for now. That was fine. Let them look past me a little longer. The program was underway by 7:30. I found a seat toward the back. No one paid me any mind. That's when Seraphine walked onto the stage. She wore blush pink and cream, her signature palette, her hair in soft curls that bounced as she took her place behind the podium. A spotlight warmed her face, and the audience hushed. Behind her, a large projection screen displayed the ThriveWell logo in soft blues and greens. Then came the title of her keynote, Rebuilding Community Through Wellness, a Scalable Model. My stomach dropped. I didn't even need to hear the rest. I recognized that title. I'd written it. As she clicked to the next slide, my fears were confirmed. The language, the diagrams, the phrasing, the linear rollout model. Even the font was eerily close to the proposal I had emailed her during a volunteer strategy session nearly 3 years ago, a proposal I had later refined and saved with timestamps, including detailed notes and version history. She hadn't just borrowed a concept, she had lifted the entire framework. My pulse quickened. My hands turned cold. But I didn't move. Not yet. Seraphine smiled brightly as the crowd nodded. She referenced data points, my data points, then transitioned into phase development, citing outcomes she had never measured, partnerships she hadn't fostered. She clicked through graphs she didn't design. I sat frozen, watching her build an empire on a foundation that wasn't hers. The audience clapped at the end of her second segment. A few donors scribbled notes. A reporter snapped another photo. It was like watching a magician pull rabbits from hats you had sewn yourself. Then the MC stepped forward. We now invite a brief Q&A from our audience. Please line up at the aisle mic. I rose, slowly, deliberately. My heels clicked softly against the tile as I approached the microphone at the center aisle. A hush settled across the room. Not full silence, but an alert stillness. Whispers followed me. I felt dozens of eyes land on my back. When I reached the mic, I adjusted it with calm fingers, even though my heart beat like a war drum. I looked directly at Seraphine. She met my gaze and froze. I spoke. Excuse me, I said, my voice calm and even, though every muscle in my body trembled beneath the surface. I authored that entire wellness model over 2 years ago. And I have time-stamped drafts, documented versions, and email records to prove it. Gasps. Audible. Some people leaned forward, others exchanged glances. From my clutch, I pulled a small device. I tapped the screen. Behind Seraphine, the projector flashed and changed. Archive, Indira's original drafts, appeared in bold across the screen, accompanied by a link. Beneath it, thumbnails of documents began to scroll, slides, notes, metadata with timestamps, my name, version numbers, and emails from my account to hers. Seraphine's smile cracked. She stepped back from the podium, eyes wide, jaw tight. Oh, come on, Indira, she said, a laugh forced and shaky. We all build on each other's work. That's how collaboration happens, right? Her words rang hollow, thin. The crowd wasn't buying it. A man near the front, a longtime donor, judging by his VIP tag, stood abruptly. She's a fraud, he said flatly. That's plagiarism. The MC turned to me, his voice measured but respectful. Thank you for the clarification, Ms. Rao, he said. We'll be sure to follow up. The reporters swiveled their cameras. Flashbulbs turned from Seraphine to me. Guests murmured. Some nodded. Some frowned. But the tide had turned. The center of gravity in that ballroom had shifted. Seraphine's face was blotched red now. Her fingers curled around the podium before letting go. She stormed off the stage, flanked by staff, whispering furiously. I didn't chase her. I stood still for a moment, the room rippling around me. The applause that followed was hesitant, polite, but it was there. Outside the ballroom, I stepped into the cooler air of the lobby. The wind from the revolving doors brushed my face like a blessing. I let out a long breath, chest tightening, not with fear this time, but with power, with release. Then my phone buzzed. A notification. Hey, this is Tasha from Widecast. We'd love to interview you tonight. Your story needs a bigger stage. Another ping. Deborah, attorney. Now we have leverage. I looked out the glass doors to the city lights beyond and realized this wasn't just about vindication. This was a message, a warning, a reckoning, a reclaiming, and I had delivered it. The moment I read Deborah's message, now we have leverage, something cracked open inside me. Not relief, not triumph. A storm. A visceral, electric swell of adrenaline, dread, and defiance that surged through my chest like a current. I slammed the laptop shut and leaned back in my chair, trying to slow my breath. My pulse pounded at the base of my neck. Outside, Dallas was cloaked in stillness. Night had draped itself across the skyline in a velvet hush. I stepped onto the narrow balcony outside my apartment, barefoot, heart still galloping. The skyline shimmered in the distance, scattered with office lights blinking through a haze of summer humidity and city exhaust. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once, then fell quiet. I stared out, repeating the words I'd carried for months now, like armor. They will listen. Grandma Edwina's voice still echoed inside me. It always did, especially when the world tried to drown me in silence. She had spoken those words into my spirit long before I understood what they meant. But tonight, under the haze of street lamps and neon signs, I knew exactly what she'd meant. I was no longer whispering, and they were finally starting to hear me. By the time sunlight filtered through my blinds the next morning, my phone was already vibrating across the nightstand. Notifications, emails, mentions, news alerts. A podcast producer had locked in the interview I'd agreed to the night before. Prime slot. They wanted me live, unfiltered, on tonight's show. And the archive, Indira's Originals link I had released at the gala? It had spread like wildfire. Retweets, news previews, a breaking headline on a local affiliate. It wasn't viral yet, but the traction was real. So was the risk. I knew there would be blowback. I just didn't know how fast it would come. Around noon, I was heating up leftover lentils when my phone buzzed again, this time louder, shriller, a live notification, @Thrive. With Seraphine is going live. I stared at the screen. I didn't want to click, but I did. Her wellness account, neatly curated, pastel-filtered, filled with affirmations she didn't live by, was broadcasting from a sleek office space. Seraphine sat front and center, framed perfectly in a designer chair, light spilling over her shoulder like a halo. Her makeup was flawless, her posture serene, her voice measured, controlled, warm, until it wasn't. Halfway through, her tone shifted. "I want to be transparent," she said, as if honesty was something she could summon. "I know there's been a lot of noise online about plagiarism, betrayal, even abuse. And I want you to see what I've seen, what I've endured." Then she rolled a clip of me, a shaky video of me crying in my car after a panic attack, another of me leaving a voicemail, voice trembling, one from years ago, shaking on the couch after a family fight, old raw footage, me at my lowest, recorded without consent, edited without mercy. On the screen, she overlaid white block letters in capital font. Unstable, dramatic, manipulative, and then her voice again. "You see this, everyone? This is what she's been hiding." The comments started flying. Some people believed her, others laughed, a few liked the video in real time. I felt the blood drain from my face, my stomach twisted. I backed away from the phone like it had burned me. It was character assassination in real time. I sat down hard on the floor, hands clenched. My breathing grew shallow. For a split second, I actually reached for my computer. My instinct, delete everything, the folder, the drive, all of it. I couldn't let her twist my truth into something grotesque. But I froze, and then my phone rang. Deborah. Her voice, calm, steady, unshaken. "Don't move," she said. "Don't panic. This is when you stand still and swing hard." I swallowed. My throat burned. I was shaking. But not because I was afraid, not anymore, because I was furious. I stood up. I walked to my desk. I reopened the folder I had almost deleted. Inside were hours of raw documentation, hospital records, voice messages, chat logs, camera footage, photographic evidence, witness accounts, journal entries, everything. I opened my secure drive. I clicked upload. Not excerpts, not redacted clips, the full archive, chronological, contextual, bulletproof. I typed the caption. This is not a story, it's survival. I copied the link, and I posted it publicly on every platform I owned: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. This time, no curated edits, no pretense, just truth, undeniable, uncomfortable, unpolished truth. Within minutes, my notifications lit up like a wildfire had started in my pocket. People clicked, watched, commented, then came the reactions. Tweets with the hashtag #JusticeForIndira. Users dug up old threads, recalling when Seraphine's stories never quite lined up. A former classmate of hers quote-tweeted the video, writing, "She did the same thing to our nonprofit pitch in college." We stayed quiet. Another voice added, "I remember her stealing wellness journal prompts from a grief group I ran. This checks out." Even those who had doubted me began to speak out. I thought she was the real deal. I was wrong. Across town, someone screen-recorded Seraphine's live feed freezing mid-sentence as users flooded the comment section with my archive link. "Check the receipts," they typed. "Why are you deleting comments?" This isn't wellness, this is theft. Even moderators on her own subreddit began allowing criticism. The tide had turned. I wasn't erased. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. Later that evening, I sat at my desk again, this time in front of a ring light and a podcast mic. The producer counted me in. 3, 2, 1. Joining us tonight is Indira Rao, whose video testimony has shaken one of the country's fastest-growing wellness brands. Indira, thank you for being here. I leaned forward, calm, steady, unshaken. And I began to speak, not as a victim, not as a scandal, but as someone who had been silenced too long, someone they could no longer ignore, because in that flood of retweets, articles, comment threads, and new voices joining mine, I was no longer a footnote in Seraphine's story. I was the author of my own. That night, sleep eluded me. I reviewed every frame of my archive, every timestamp, every email chain. I pressed my fingers to my temples, feeling the tremor of dread and resolve interwoven in my veins. Morning came, and I dressed in black blazer and crisp slacks. In the mirror, I forced my shoulders back, squared my jaw. It was my day. I arrived early at the Dallas County Civil Court. The building loomed with gray stone, steps wide and imposing. Inside, marble floors echoed footfalls, voices hushed and reverent. I passed the reception desk, handed over my ID, and made my way to the courtroom. Reporters peered through windows. Staff nodded. Seraphine waited at counsel table, silent and stiff. Her eyes flicked to me, no expression. Camden and Marisol sat behind her, tightly pressed, as if bracing for collapse. Judge Harrison took his seat. The gavel fell. Our case opened on Turner Fee. Seraphine Caldwell. Claims of reckless endangerment, emotional distress, falsified medical harm. Deborah introduced the exhibits, medical records, overdose indicators, lab reports. I listened unemotionally. When it was my turn, I walked to the stand with measured steps. I spoke slowly, clearly. I almost died because the medication I depended on was changed. I trusted my family, and they betrayed me. This is not about retaliation. This is about accountability. I saw reference charts behind me, correlating my prior prescriptions with the switched batch. The courtroom remained silent, tension building. On day 2, Deborah asked for a surprise witness, Mrs. Linda Hayes, neighbor at 1125 Maple Street. She took the stand, voice shaky. Then she handed over a small flashcard. "This is footage from my outdoor security camera," she said. The screen flickered to life, a blur of Seraphine stepping into the hallway late at night, reaching past my medicine cabinet. In another clip, she laughed. "Let's see if she catches this." A hush. The judge leaned forward. Seraphine's attorney sat silent. Counsel for Seraphine requested recess. In the gallery, faces turned. I felt relief cresting. In the afternoon, voices rose. Camden shouted from the gallery, "You're airing our family dirty to strangers!" Marisol sobbed softly, her hand in her lap, silent tears. Seraphine lashed out, stumbling past security toward me, but was blocked. Reporters clamored. I remained calm. The faces in the courtroom had shifted. Some gazes recognized me. After the session, I exited the courtroom into a courtyard blanketed with sunlight. Photographers shouted my name. I walked slowly, turning each question over in my mind. Behind me, Deborah placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "The judge wants closing arguments tomorrow." The courtroom doors felt heavier that morning, as though they bore the weight of every accusation ever denied. I stood in the hallway, hidden behind a marbled column, inhaling deep breaths. The echo of, "The judge wants closing arguments tomorrow," still lingered in my mind, mingling with the hush of the hall. I smoothed my blazer one last time and stepped into the chamber, where anticipation crackled like static. When Deborah took the podium for closing statements, silence fell. Her voice was calm but firm. "Your Honor, this case is not about pills. It is about a pattern of cruelty. To dismiss it as a misunderstanding would be a miscarriage of justice." She walked past exhibit boards, photos, emails, security clips, versions of my wellness drafts, the video archive. "Ms. Caldwell misused her trust. The evidence before you is clear." She paused, then fixed her eyes on Seraphine. This was no joke. I felt every eye shift toward me. Overhead lights cast long shadows. Seraphine, pale, a monologue crumbling behind a mask of control. Next, I stood to give my own final words. My voice felt steady. "I'm not here for vengeance. I'm here so no one else survives in silence. I ask you, Judge, not simply to rule, but to affirm a voice that's been denied." I gestured toward the archival compilation. "These are not stories. They are maps of betrayal. Having lived the consequences, I came here seeking accountability." The gavel rested heavy in its holder. My chest tightened, but I held. When the judge ruled, the room held its breath. "I find Ms. Caldwell liable for emotional and physical damage. I award Ms. Dawn Indira compensatory and punitive damages. Furthermore, I issue a permanent restraining order prohibiting Mrs. Caldwell from approaching Ms. Indira or representing her work." The echo of the gavel sent murmur through gallery seats. Seraphine lowered her head. Her hands trembled. The judge continued, "Let this decision stand as a statement. Abuse will not hide behind family. Let silence no longer protect cruelty." The finality pressed outward. After the verdict, we exited the courtroom into midday sunshine. Reporters and cameras flared. Camden and Marisol stood together, hands clasped. Camden's lips quivered. "You made your choice." My voice, though tired, came clear. "No, you did." They said nothing more. 3 months passed. I left Dallas behind. In the small coastal town of Seasons Bay, Oregon, I opened a new life. A rented apartment overlooking fog-kissed waters, walls I painted in soft eggshell tones, shelves I draped with books about recovery, advocacy, survivor stories. I began work for a nonprofit aiding those trapped by abusive silence, helping them find legal avenues, mental health support, safe passage. One evening, as twilight settled over Pacific Pines, I pulled out an old recording device, hidden in a drawer I hadn't visited in years. My fingers shook. I pressed play. Grandma Edwina's voice crackled through. "Don't carry their silence. Speak, even if your voice shakes." My eyes blurred. I whispered into the empty room. I did. I hung photographs of lighthouses and wildflowers, each one a quiet promise. I won't exist just to prove a point. I exist because my story mattered. I didn't win a family back. I found something deeper, myself. In the end, this wasn't just about a courtroom or a bottle of pills. It was about being silenced, erased, and finally choosing to speak. How many of us have been told to keep the peace at the cost of our own sanity? Sometimes, healing begins the moment we stop protecting those who hurt us. If this story moved you or made you reflect on your own experience, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that speak the truth others fear to say.